This is our next lecture. This time it's on public goods. So what are public goods? Actually, when you think of it, there are three categories of goods that we could distinguish. The first one category, these are goods that are supplied by private sector. These are goods that are normally provided by market. This could be retailing, hotel services, but also many others. There are also some goods that are kind of traditionally supplied by government only. This is national defense, this could be fire brigades, this could be health services, for instance. Although the last example is more complicated because healthcare can actually be supplied by both. We know private hospitals and we've got public hospitals. We've got private education, we've got public education. Anyway, there are some goods that are clearly, partly or exclusively supplied by the government. Why is it so? First of all, let's have a look at the characteristics of private goods. What makes some goods very appropriate for market to supply them? Think of French fries. If you go to the McDonald's, let's say, you get your French fries there if you pay. If you don't pay, you don't get them. This kind of feature we call excludability, which means that with regards to French fries, it's very easy to exclude some people from having them, from using them. Another feature of private goods is rivalry in consumption. This is what you experience when you want to see a popular movie and you come late to the cinema. All the best seats are already taken and actually you get worse tickets than you normally would like to have. This is because there is rivalry in consumption when it comes to movie tickets. The more people buy those tickets, the less attractive seats will remain available, or it may even happen that you cannot watch the movie because there are no seats available. That would be a kind of extreme example of rivalry in consumption. So rivalry in consumption is about more for you, less for others. The third quality of typical private goods is divisibility. When you think of French fries, movie tickets or a newspaper, they are relatively cheap, so you can afford to buy them. Those three features make it very easy for markets to supply them. Public goods are, however, different. They tend to be very beneficial for the whole society, but they have a certain characteristics that makes market pretty unable to supply them. So the market would not supply enough of them, or it could be even unable to supply them at all. Some people would say that public goods are a kind of extreme case of externalities, positive externalities, and that is a kind of view we could actually accept. So what is the characteristics of public goods? Well, it's pretty reversed when you compare public goods to private goods. With respect to public goods, we would say there is no rivalry in consumption. A very good example is a beautiful sunshine that anyone can enjoy. If you watch a sunshine, well, we do not see normally any kind of rivalry in consumption. I can watch it, you can watch it, we can all benefit from that. The second characteristics, the second feature of public goods is non-excludability. it is quite difficult, time-consuming, costly, or simply not possible at all to exclude some people from using public goods. This is like national defense, for instance. The army would defend all the citizens regardless of the question whether they paid their taxes to support the army or not. If your house is on fire, the fire brigade would come and try to put out the fire, not asking you actually what was the amount of taxes that you paid recently and do you have any proof of that. The last feature of public goods is non-divisibility, which happens quite usually with public goods. We all like using airports. They are quite useful, but none of us could actually afford to have one. Public goods usually come in such great quantities, they represent such a high value that a normal average individual could not afford them. So why would market fail to supply public goods? Whenever you want to buy something that represents the value of, let's say, 3,000 to you, and you have the opportunity to buy it at the price of 2,000, then you would certainly buy it. If the price that you will be charged is much lower than the value that you assign to this thing, then you can buy it. This is normal with private goods. Public goods are a bit different. Look at the Selfish Street. It is a dirt track. All the people living in the street have their shoes dirty, their cars are dirty whenever there is rain. Whenever it's raining, the street becomes very muddy. And actually, all those 10 families living in Selfish Street decided to do something about that. And they figured out that actually, on average, each of them would value a new asphalt road at the level of 3,000. So we could say covering the Selfish Street with asphalt represents the value of 30,000 to all the people who live there. They asked some contractors whether it would be possible to cover this street with asphalt. The cost of that is 20,000. So, should it be a problem then to cover this street with asphalt if the people value that at the level of 30,000 and it can be done for 20,000? Well, it should not be a problem. It is enough if everyone contributes 2,000 and the job is done. However, let's meet Mr. Abraham, who lives at 1 Selfish Street. This is what he thinks. Well, obviously, I could spend 2,000 on this venture. And obviously, this is less than the value that I see. I would actually pay 3,000 if I had to. So I could pay 2,000 and have the job done. But the question is, do I have to pay? Perhaps I don't have to pay because others would pay anyway, so they could finance this street without my contribution. And since they cannot exclude me from using this street, I can use it. What kind of action can they take, actually? They wouldn't put asphalt in front of my residence. well, then their cars, their shoes would get dirty right here at the very beginning of the street. So the whole idea would be bust. No, I'm not gonna pay, says Mr. Abraham, and the whole venture would go anyway. If one person gives up, the cost, the average cost, would increase. You can see it in the slide. But then we've got Mr. Branson that lives at 2 Selfish Street. The Branson's family says, no, we are not going to pay. Why would we pay if the Abraham family doesn't pay as well? So we don't pay. We back off. And then we've got only 8 families left, each of them covering now this venture with the cost of 2,500. So as you can see, people may give up in the hope that the whole venture will be realized without them taking part. The more people would drop, the higher would be the cost. If 5 people from Selfish Street gives up, then we've got 4,000 to be paid by the remaining 5. As you remember, on average, they said, this whole venture represents the value of 3,000 to me. If now I'm supposed to pay 4,000, well, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna pay. This is how the characteristics of public goods prevents market from supplying them. The problem that we have here with Selfish Street is actually an old problem that we have. This is the problem of free riding. It is as old as lighthouses. That was, the problem even many centuries ago. How to finance lighthouses. Lighthouses that were very useful for sailors, preventing them from crashing against rocks, showing them the safe track to the harbor. But who would pay? Building and maintaining a lighthouse is quite expensive. Once it is built, once it is put in operation, then anyone can see the lights. Those who pay, those who contribute, and those who don't. Well, this problem was usually solved by associations of shippers. They used to build lighthouses, and they used to introduce a fee that was paid in ports. That was fee for visiting the port, so it was not connected to actual services of the lighthouses. We do not care whether you use our lighthouse or not. We simply say, if you visit our port, then you have to contribute to the lighthouse. So this is kind of user fee concept or potential user fee concept. This is typically nowadays the idea about national parks. National parks are supported by user fees. There are tickets. If you want to visit a park, you have to pay for that. This is quite a good idea, meaning normally public goods are financed by taxes, so they are financed by all taxpayers. That doesn't seem to be particularly fair, because some of those people do not hike in the mountains, for instance, or do not visit national parks. So it seems to be reasonable to move those payments closer to users rather, not generally all taxpayers. Obviously there are some problems here, like for instance how to estimate demand for national parks and therefore how to price the entrance to such a park. But this is environmental economics that deals with such problems, and they have some answers to this problem as well. How about public goods? Are they all government supplied goods? I mean, are all government supplied goods public? Well, not necessarily. A lot of changes here. Actually, to say that a good is a public one, it must meet the criteria, the features. It must have the features that we mentioned, like non-rivalry in consumption, non-excludability, and non-divisibility. Traditionally, television and radio broadcast were considered to be public. Obviously, if someone broadcasts signal and you have a receiver like a television or radio, well, then it is impossible to exclude you. And actually, this is what fits very well the definition of public goods. However, we've got new technologies, we've got cable TV, we've got pay-per-view programs, and that makes excludability far more popular, far more possible, in fact. Public roads. Are they public? We call them public, but actually they are not always public in the sense of, in the economic sense of public goods. Why? Well, if the roads get crowded, then we say there is some rivalry in consumption. Whenever you want to go back home by car during rush hours, it takes you considerably longer. Why? Because of other people who drive their cars. So we've got here what we called rivalry in consumption. So crowded roads are not that public anymore. How many public goods should we produce in the economy? For private goods, we usually allow this problem to be solved by markets. But since we know public goods cannot be efficiently supplied by markets, then how we do it? Well, this is all about marginal benefits and marginal costs. You remember that marginal benefits would reflect demand, whereas marginal costs would reflect supply. And if that is so, then marginal benefits would intersect with marginal costs, giving us equilibrium, quantity, the desired, the optimal quantity, and the desired, the optimal price. It is, however, more complicated here. Let's consider public good like police officers. How many police officers should we have? What should be the quantity here? Obviously, we do realize that with each and every additional police officer employed, we have some marginal costs resulting from this kind of employment, and we've got also marginal benefits. Marginal benefits because the number of police officers is certainly related to the crime level. The more police officers, the lower is crime level. It is quite easy to find marginal costs. It is quite easy to find the answer to the question, what is the cost of having one additional police officer more? This is, training expenditures and salary and uniform, handcuffs, baton, gun, half of a car, if they use them in pairs, so that would be half of a car. We can calculate those costs. What is really difficult is the part of benefits. What is the benefit of having one additional police officer more? This is very difficult to answer. The same applies to firefighters And it gets even more complicated when you think of the army. Rarely we hear the idea that we should not have any army at all. But there comes the question, how big should be this army? How much money should we spend on national defense? What is the marginal benefit of spending 1,000 more on army? This is very difficult. Hence, the answer to the question, how much public goods we should have, still remains unanswered to a great extent. Okay, thank you very much for your attention. This is all for today. See you next time.